The work of Satan? Jelly babies, gummies, mass hysteria? What caused children to begin collapsing in multiple incidents across England? Keep watching to learn all about the Hollinwell incident that took place in England in 1980.
This field behind at Hollinwell in Nottinghamshire is where it all went wrong yesterday.
On July 13, 1980, hundreds of young musicians from local school bands gathered in Kirkby in Ashfield, a mining town just north of Nottingham, England, to compete at the annual Hollinwell show. When the show started at 9 a.m., everything seemed fine, but just after 10:30 a.m., the contestants started to collapse. Ultimately, 259 people, most of them children, were treated at area hospitals for symptoms that included fainting, vomiting, headaches, dizziness, and pain in their eyes and throats. Luckily, nobody died, but more than 4 decades later, people are still asking what caused the Hollinwell incident. One reason people are so keen to figure out the cause of the Hollinwell incident is that it's not the only time something like this has happened. In fact, something almost identical happened 8 years earlier in Hazelrig, Northumberland, where 168 children at another marching band festival also collapsed. According to Fortean Times, many of those kids, along with a few adults in attendance, complained of sharp abdominal pains. Doctors noted that the pain seemed to subside once the victims had been away from the parade field for a period of time. A doctor noted of the victims, they were all frightened and bewildered, many of them believing they had been poisoned, and several spontaneously said they had thought that they were dying. And another similar incident happened in Whitchurch, Bristol, where around 500 people watching a pedal car race at an abandoned airport reported a stinging feeling in their eyes. Many required medical attention for burns on their hands and faces, as well as watery eyes, and around 200 were still experiencing symptoms the next day. In the Whitchurch incident, symptoms were blamed on tar dust from the racetrack, but coming up with a plausible reason for the incident at Hollinwell has been more difficult. When the symptoms first hit, people at the event suspected food poisoning, and people were warned not to eat the ice cream or drink the water. Photographer Neil Lancashire, who was at the Hollinwell show, told Nottinghamshire Live, "I did not think much of it to start, and then the person over the tannoy said something like, 'Don't eat the ice cream,' as they thought it was causing the fainting. A lot of the children eating ice cream then fainted." He said that they also thought something sprayed by local farmers may have tainted the water, but health inspectors later tested the food and water and found nothing. Though the water checked out okay, some thought the Hollinwell incident may have been caused by pesticides, either sprayed on the ground themselves or carried by a wind from local farms. Investigations did find that a pesticide called Calixin had been sprayed on fields in the immediate area. Calixin contains tritamorph, which the World Health Organization considers moderately hazardous and is now banned by the UK. This led to hysterical headlines about gas clouds knocking out children. However, the Nottinghamshire Fire Service said that a gas cloud from local fields was unlikely, as the wind was blowing the wrong direction. And a pesticide toxicity specialist ruled out the grounds themselves, saying, "It's highly unlikely that tritamorph would have caused the children to collapse if they'd been exposed to it directly, given that it isn't harmful to non-pregnant adults or children, and it was sprayed in a field several hundred yards away 2 or 3 days before." One of the weirder theories about the Hollinwell incident was put forward by a man from Scotland who called the local police and claimed high-frequency radio waves were the culprit. According to the American Cancer Society, if the human body is hit with a large enough amount of radio waves, it can cause tissue damage. The difficulty in this explaining the Hollinwell incident is that all of the affected people would have had to have been exposed for quite a while, and even then, there is no proof that the effects would manifest so significantly and so immediately as to cause the sort of panic that took place on that Sunday morning. Still, this theory gained some traction as the Fortean Times reported that a high-frequency radio transmitter was found near the location. Another theory was that the incident was triggered by the Coxsackie virus, which causes hand, foot, and mouth disease. This illness typically affects children, causing blisters on the hands and feet, among other symptoms, with patients typically getting better in 1 to 2 weeks. Though this theory fit with the timeline of recovery for many of the children affected, it didn't explain the immediate symptoms people experienced at the Hollinwell show. Ultimately, foot, hand, and mouth disease was rejected as a possible cause due to its inability to explain the diversity of effects on people during the event. Weird events like this always bring the possibilities of aliens and UFOs into the fray. About a week after the Hollinwell incident, the Daily Telegraph ran a story about claims of a UFO landing in a nearby field, which the police investigated. But what connection the two events might have, if any, was never established. Still, if it wasn't aliens, there's always the possibility that it was Satan. Yes, a website called End Times Prophecy Report posits that the Hollinwell incident was a manifestation of demonic power. According to them, Satan and/or his minions were wreaking havoc on that parade ground in 1980. Given that the main effect was just some fainting, though, it's not exactly great PR for the effectiveness of Satan or his minions.
You, watching this at home, Worship me! I command you!
Once most of the theories were found to be incapable of fully explaining the Hollinwell incident, most experts began to suspect that this was a case of mass hysteria, or epidemic hysteria. At the time, this idea was put forth by two doctors, Dr. William Thompson and British Psychological Society spokesman Dr. John Nicholson, who both offered mass hysteria as an explanation. In a piece for The Observer, Denise Wynn wrote, "It was primed by a combination of the anxiety of performing and the tension of waiting for a long period at attention, so that when the trigger came, the rest followed in a mounting wave of unintentional mimicry." One of the kids present during the show now believes as an adult that it was mass hysteria, writing, "As for the cause, who knows? Thinking about it now, I'd say it was hysteria, a large gathering of children, excited and also nervous about a competition which they took very seriously. You have to remember that there was a lot of healthy rivalry in those marching bands." Another form of mass hysteria that came up in connection with the Hollinwell incident is sociogenic hysteria, or mass psychogenic illness, according to the Canadian Medical Association Journal. This involves the rapid spread of illness signs and symptoms affecting members of a cohesive group, originating from a nervous system disturbance involving excitation, loss, or alteration of function. For example, there's evidence that today's youth are developing mass disorders through social media. Mental health professionals worldwide are documenting outbreaks of adolescents who are picking up Tourette's-like behavior from TikTok. In Hollinwell, the excitement and weariness felt by a bunch of kids who had been up and practicing for a while and were nervous about the upcoming competition might have been enough for sociogenic mass illness to take place. Dr. Robert Bartholomew notes that this has happened throughout history. The forms it took on varied from convent fever to panics at factories, theaters, and schools. One famous example was the laughing epidemic of 1962, which affected school children in Africa.
Thousands of people in the nation of Tanzania would start laughing for no apparent reason. For days, even weeks, it became known as the laughing disease.
Dr. Bartholomew notes that this kind of mass hysterical illness can mimic the symptoms of other illnesses that are common to the culture or setting. Sociogenic illness might be the most likely culprit for the Hollinwell incident because it would explain the immediacy of the event as well as the eventual dying down of symptoms once people had been removed from the context. Another truly strange element of this tale is what happened after the initial event. It was like a domino effect. According to reports, 3 days after the Hollinwell incident, 4 people in Worksop, not far away, suddenly suffered similar symptoms. The following weekend, one of the bands originally affected at Hollinwell again passed out during a march. 2 weeks after the Hollinwell incident, 19 children fell ill on a bus ride from Lincoln to Leicester. It seemed that whatever was going on was not strictly tied to the immediate local context, but was spreading out almost like a pandemic. These later incidents made it difficult for those who were present and got sick, or saw loved ones get sick, to accept the diagnosis of mass hysteria. According to Dr. Robert Bartholomew and Bob Rickard, sloppy and excitable reporting dogged the event and undoubtedly contributed to the overall confusion in the wider public. For example, The Guardian reported that traces of blood and protein had been found in samples of urine taken from some of the children, possibly indicating kidney damage. It seemed misinformation around what a diagnosis of mass hysteria actually means was prevalent in reporting, and still was later during reinvestigations into the Hollinwell incident, such as one the BBC did in 2003. Many conspiracy theorists believe that mass hysteria is a convenient dodge meant to cover up the truth, while parents of the afflicted children believe that their kids were being blamed, or even accused of making it all up. There was still another aspect of the Hollinwell incident that was easily missed by all of the reporting done on it. According to the Fortean Times, before the event took place, there had been an announcement over the intercom warning people to not consume joke jelly babies.
Would you like a jelly baby?
Shut up! Jelly babies are a British treat similar to gummy bears, and some believe it may have been this announcement that planted the seed of mass hysteria that followed. It also could have been the widely reported warning about ice cream, but investigators couldn't determine whether that warning actually even happened or not. The panic was only heightened by 2 mothers and their infants. One reportedly looked down to see her baby covered in blisters, and the other could not rouse her baby from sleep, and her terror was only made worse by the children collapsing around her. All of these incidents, taken together, could help explain the context in which some form of hysteria could have easily been stoked. With events like the Hollinwell incident, it's hard enough to come up with a conclusion with a typical investigation. When one adds in the media frenzy, the conflicts between the public record and witnesses, and the continuous misinformation and misconceptions that abound, it is not at all surprising that the truth became included within the wider hysteria of high-profile cases like these. Among the many missing pieces of information is the lack of knowledge of who, in fact, was the first child or adult to fall ill or faint. Another one is whether or not there were additional announcements made over the intercom after the warning about joke jelly babies that stoked the theories of food and drink poisoning. Adding to the climate of fear, there was also a radio bulletin stating that a horse fell ill during the Hollinwell incident, as did 5 other horses during a subsequent event. The animals reportedly had to be put down, but neither of these claims were confirmed as true by the organizers of the events or the investigators. It also doesn't help that no matter how conclusive an investigation is, there will still be those who refuse to believe the official explanation, whether due to misconceptions or outlying evidence that doesn't quite fit the official record. Parents believe there was a cover-up, and politicians were quick to capitalize by stoking even more fears. In the end, we are left with more questions than answers.